So welcome, Davina, to our second conversation where we are going to be chatting about how life has been since we last spoke. And so much has moved through for both of us. I know this from contact that we've had. Our original conversation was very much framing your relationship with the breath, because I'd seen you post about doing a deep sea dive and how that experience was for you, which absolutely fascinated me. And at that point on your journey, you were about to leave the known, which for many people would be the unknown and be a huge adventure, of being what you called a mountain shaman, to go and take your whole life, pack it all down and go to the jungle to become a jungle shaman. And this was just before the pandemic hit. So today, I'd like to welcome you, first of all, to people who don't know you: Hay House author, Feng Shui expert, shaman, medicine woman, elder, just an incredible being who has been such a transformational part of my own journey that I'm eternally grateful for that connection, Davina, and for the work that you do in the world. And I'd love to introduce you and give you the space to say more in your own words about yourself or about your life or anything that you want to bring in before we get going on how the last 12 months has affected you, as it has many of us, in relationship to our personal inner journey and how that reflects outwardly in the world. So big welcome.
Thank you very much, Steph. It's such a delightful welcome. I feel like it's very strange even to be in conversation like this. I really have been extraordinarily isolated for over a year now. We came through the manifestation portal, which I always believe is between 12 and 13. We left the UK on Feb the 12th, arrived on the 13th, and it was like the doors closed behind us. There was no way back. And it has felt this extraordinary adventure has begun there. And of course, one of the big sayings that constantly has been in my mind this whole year really has been, people plan, God laughs, because of course I came here, yes, to practice shamanism in the jungle. We have a retreat center. We have 47 hectares of beautiful Amazonian land, but to build a temple. I'm about as far away from that today as I was when I arrived, and possibly further, to be honest. And it's not that journey has been nothing to do with that. The first 2 months, we had one retreat, which was fantastic. And then obviously COVID closed the world down. And for the first 2 months, it was very extreme here, the lockdown, military police on the streets, using gun butts to keep you apart, having to walk through body disinfectant sprays to go to the market, etc. Everything closed down. We spent 2 months in the jungle without coming out at all. Now I have no Wi-Fi. We've just got a better connection now, but we had no Wi-Fi in the jungle at times. So we were just occasionally, if you walk 20 minutes through a swamp up to higher land through the rainforest, being bitten to death by mosquitoes, wandering around in the ever loving hope that you might get a signal. Occasionally we could hook on someone's mobile and get some WhatsApp messages and things, but it's pretty random. And so you'd get these snippets of news. So it was this extraordinarily disconnected bubble, and where you're just not in that fear propaganda that has, enveloped the globe, basically. And yet I have definitely experienced fear because I did come to the jungle. I don't speak the language. I don't know anything about, my God, the vulnerability, I've learned a lot in the last year, but the vulnerability of those first few weeks, months was extraordinary. Everything from, to begin with, literally every drop of water, every mouthful of food, every bit of gas for the fire, everything has to come 4 hours upriver on a boat. Wow. And then lugged onto that boat and lugged off that boat. You cannot do it alone. So the first lesson was community, was teamwork, was you literally cannot survive on your own in the jungle. And this, I think, is massive in terms of this pandemic, because of course everybody's been forced into their little boxes, forced into isolation, forced to be alone. And I hear it when I get messages from friends who live on their own in a flat in London, for example, and I hear the mental deterioration of the isolation. So the biggest lesson is we have to maintain, whatever we do, maintain community, maintain contact, maintain links. That's really powerful, and has been a massive teaching of literally, I cannot do this without other human beings.
Yeah. I'd just like to interject there. Well, there's a couple of things I'd love, without going into specifics, maybe you want to say more for the people who are watching about exactly where you are in the jungle.
Yeah.
But also this part about community, because I think wherever you are, whether you're in the jungle with the things that you're facing around fear, which may be very literal, you already spoke before we came on live about how the river can rise and fall, the Amazon, by 10 to 15 meters overnight. And I was like, oh my God. And you talked about your land before, and I'm living on this land, and I was thinking, well, actually, you're probably living on the river at the moment. But wherever you are, whether it is in those flats in London or whether it's in a random place, I would love to expand at some point more about this sense of fear, because the whole world has flipped into a very, like we're all seeing people as fundamentally sick instead of fundamentally well. And then the fear that's come in, and seeing people step back and seeing people freeze, seeing people isolated and lonely. One of the things that has come through repeatedly through my 21-day breathwork challenge and the breathwork sessions that I run every Saturday for free is actually, it's not even about the practice. It might not be about, in your case, the shamanism. It might not be about the breathwork. It's about the community. And people are so desperate for holding on to this sense of connection. Because whether or not you are pulling things off a boat and getting your supplies, or whether you're just staying literally, emotionally and mentally afloat, there's a nice metaphor, please say more about whereabouts you are and what you've noticed about fear.
So where we're about, as I say, 3.5, 4 hours upriver from a small kind of real melting pot. It's basically a gold mining town. It's kind of exploded because of mining. It has every illegal industry on the planet. It's not a nice place to be most of the time. I'd rather be in the jungle than in Puerto Maldonado. So we're on the river Tambaplata, and this river is quite unusual even for the jungle. It is a confluence of two rivers, and it's one of the tributaries. But we have a Shipibo guy working with us at the moment, lovely guy, and he's shocked by our river. Because in Polkalpa, where he comes from, the river doesn't do this massive up and down drop so severely. So, for example, I live effectively in a garden shed. I mean, it's just a wooden hut with some mosquito net around it. That's the only protection I have from the elements. And there have these, when the storms come, there are horrific storms, like Armageddon type storms, where you understand just your absolute minuscule futility of being human. Really, when you are faced the fundamental sort of force of nature. And these storms, because there's no wind, it's not like a storm blowing through and blowing past, they literally will sit over your land for like hours and hours and hours, and you just like lie there literally trembling. Oh, please God, get me through this, let me see the daylight again. I've done a lot of praying this. I haven't immediately gone away from shamanism. I've done probably more praying this year for different reasons than ever. But it's you get, and this is what we've done, isn't it? We've disconnected. So I find it extraordinary. So the things that bring fear for me have been very much that real, reptilian brain lizard. Oh, there's, footprints of an otorongo. There's a jaguar literally walking meters from where I'm sleeping. There's a 60-foot tree crashing down. Is it going to crush me to death in the night? Oh, am I going to make it on this boat down the rapids in the river without it capsizing in a storm? Is the lightning going to break the building? Really sort of fundamental stuff about, is the poisonous spider going to jump out, or the anaconda, or the snake, or the endless or what, I have far worse diseases to contend here than COVID, let me tell you. Flesh eating leish, this awful disease that literally you don't even see you have it, and your skin turns it, and it literally eats your internal organs. Delightful. Exactly. I've had sort of bot flies, which I've had to literally a larva that grow inside you until you can try and get them out, and etc. So anyway, a lot of those real fears. And that's what you understand, that humanity in its not finding ways to deal with that, or to be able to breathe through that and to be able to process that, has disconnected from nature. That is really premise that I see behind our disconnection from nature in the first place is trying to protect ourselves from nature. So that's the fear, isn't it? That we fear, instead of becoming, from a shamanic point of view, it's about relationship. So, and to begin with, it's taken time. It's taken time to get, because it's a very different new environment. As I say, everything was like, oh God, help, help, you know. And now when I look back in a year, I mean, I walk through the jungle. I don't, I know how to sort of take care, if you know what I mean. But I mean, to begin with, I'd be nervous. Now I'm not.
Right.
Insects will fly all around me. I'll do the garden. There's things bite. I don't really take any notice of the weird and wonderful anymore. It's amazing how quickly we also normalize into these situations.
Right.
But it's through relationship with the elements. It's through coming into relationship with that land.
Right.
So we have to have a reciprocal. That's why ceremony, ritual, all of our practices came into being with the ancients, because the ancients understood that we need relationship in order to feel safe, to overcome our fear, to not live in terror. But the disconnection from nature through our kind of plastic boxes, if you like, the worlds that we've created to create that barrier, don't actually rid us of the fear. We just get fear in a different form.
Yeah.
And I find that much more insidious, because there's nowhere, it's like, as I say, COVID, what is COVID? It's an invisible threat. It's a threat we can't see. I can see the jaguar.
Yeah.
I can see the snake about to eat, you know what I mean? Or the rising, etc., etc. It's so we now have all of these invisible fears that I think are far more traumatic to our system, in a sense. And I think the one big thing that is going to be a massive outcome of the pandemic is trauma, ongoing trauma on so many levels that we could talk about that for the rest of the week, because it is at every level of society, every level of being, from children that are wearing masks and terrified, because children absorb this stuff and they go, oh my God, mommy, are you going to die? Are you going to get sick? Because they're hearing the propaganda.
Yeah. I mean, we were walking on the beach yesterday, and a child who was, I would guess, having my own children who are grown up, she was probably about 6 years old, and there was plenty of room. It was a beach walkway right next to the ocean where you can't get much more clean, fresh air.
Yes.
And she literally stood at the side by the wall, rigid. Her mum was with a pram over on the other side with a little baby brother in it, until we'd gone through, and then looked up almost like, did I do well? Was I a good girl? I stayed, I did what I was, and I looked at this moment and I just thought, oh my gosh, these children whose natural response is very mammalian, actually, you talk about limbic brain, but it's to play, to respond, to reach out. It's all being so cauterized. And this fear that is penetrating everything, and like you say, invisible fears, in some ways it just keeps us in this cortisol state of high alert, because there isn't anything you can quite get used to or grasp. And so the mind training and how you bring that in and how you find the support, how you pick things apart, is really important. And on that note, I'd really love to hear from you, because you've obviously experienced both, because you have aspects of how the pandemic has affected your imagined life in the jungle and how it continues to affect things, but also it's changed what you thought you were experiencing. You're dealing with a whole set of different fears and things that are happening in the world. You're talking about the relationship to nature and the right up close. I agree with you about that, because this is the fundamental of shamanic practice, is being in right relationship with nature, the cycles of life, clean thinking, not going into fear. Shamans always have said fear is the real pandemic. But what I'd love to hear from you is, like, what do you feel that this experience has taught you personally? What have been your biggest lessons in this, in terms of, obviously you're there managing, is that 60-foot tree going to fall on me? But then beyond that, when you go into, Davina's inner world, like, what do you feel it's teaching you at the moment?
I think it's been a huge, it's never what we think, is it? Or it's never what we think when we set out. So this for me has been an annihilation of the self, or my perceived self, the self I thought I was when I left. I don't know actually who the Davina is that's going to emerge from the jungle eventually, because there's no view here. So it's an incredibly internal, I mean, I've lived in the forest in the UK for the last few years, and I'm deeper in the forest. I mean, literally deeper in the forest. There is no view. When you're in there, you can barely see the stars. And I used to be able to go out to the river and at least stand on our steps, and you get a bit more broader perspective of the world. At least watching the river, you can see the skyline. But since the recent floods, our whole stairway has been washed away and all our banks. I can't even do that now. So it's like being closed in. It's like, you know, I've really got to face whatever that is, that internal forest. It's just the green, just the landscape. And of course, it's never quiet. You know, there's no peace in the jungle. Or there's a peace is a different thing. People think, oh, you're in nature, it's so peaceful. Well, the jungle is exceptionally noisy. Again, you have to find the peace beyond that. So you have to sink even deeper.
Wow.
So it's an internal resourcing at an extremely deep level that, to be honest, Steph, I don't know exactly what or who I will be when I come out of this. I'm still in it.
Yeah.
And I'm still very much in the process. I mean, my self-resourcing is the breath, absolutely, is really self-care as much as is possible within the kind of very harsh environment. And it's also a very gendered environment. I mean, it does bring up my feminist self that I've never really been that strong on. And I get quite antsy on that one out here, because Peruvian culture, God bless it, is and particularly in the jungle, and it's for a reason. But that's another thing. You have to get off your high horse,
right?
Because I'm older, and B, I'm not physically as strong as these guys. But, you know, I might like to be, and I might like, oh, I can do as much as you can do, but the fact is I can't. Stop. So so I do what I can offer to the community. And this is another thing. It's like, what I can offer to the community is I'm a really good cook. So I spend a lot of time in the kitchen cooking for blokes. A huge amount of this year has been in the kitchen cooking for blokes.
Wow.
And I didn't, that wasn't kind of my intention. And that's what I'm saying about, you know, humble up, get over it.
Yeah. Well,
that is actually the best service that I can give of myself to making the team work in this moment.
And we talked a bit about humility and being in service before, because you know, we have these ideas, and it's very interesting what you said also about the fact of what you can and can't do, both in relationship to the team, but also in terms of gender. Because I saw something a couple of days ago, I was reading it in the newspaper, and it was talking about how the US military had introduced a gender neutral fitness test because they were trying to do the right thing. But actually, the women were failing because they just didn't have some aspects that the men had in terms of physical strength. And I say this, you know, with great reverence and respect. And as somebody who, you know, I've always done circuit training my whole life. I've been a fighter and I've pushed, and I can do that. And I'm coming to the part where I can accept that, well, not only might there be gender-based things I can and can't do, but there are certainly age-based things, like you said, you know, that it's like, okay, but the value of this for me, you know, you talked about what's kept you going, and, you know, the breath and steadying and accepting things and getting off your high horse and getting humble. And it's, for me, it's been very much about the big thing about COVID for me has been, it's a present moment awareness teacher. Because the minute I project into the future, or the minute I start feeling resentful about what's happening, or the minute I subscribe to the fear, or you know, whatever else it is that's coming up for me, the greatest teaching that I'm getting from it is how to really inhabit the present moment. And you know, when your present moment, I mean, when I hear that about your view, I'm absolutely staggered, because one of the things that's kept me utterly sane is I live in Glastonbury now, and I can walk up the Tor, and I've got this 360-degree view of the countryside and the land. And at the beginning, and for a lot of lockdown, that was my saving grace, because suddenly, instead of, I live on my own in a little flat, instead of feeling like I was in this rather lovely, luxurious semi-prison, that I was like, oh, look, here's the land. There's millions of people out there who are experiencing this, many of whom who are worse off than me. So I feel that it's definitely come to bring us this. You use the phrases, the microcosm and the macrocosm, you know, what it's reflecting on the inside and how we relate to that out there in the world. So, you know, is there anything else that you'd like to add around that?
Well, I mean, probably controversially, like some of the big inner reflections that I'm really coming to is how we overcome the big fat lie that we are all living.
Yeah.
And that big fat lie is deeper than COVID. COVID is just one manifestation of it, but really it goes back to the lie of God, really. And when I talk about God, I'm not talking about universal energy or force or spirit, but God as in the white he God of the judgmental God, in a sense of that lie that has led all of us still in this, and you can see it so clearly in COVID, of this is the real teaching of when the ancients said we are the ones who've been waiting for, because we are still giving our power away to governments, to corporations, to people that we think are somehow no better than us or can save us.
Yeah.
And it's like, when are we going to let go of that lie?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting, it's the lie that is in belief. We believe that our governments are going to somehow rescue us. It's all in the languaging, it's all in the spell of it.
It's
it's being the lie in the life, and we have to. So all of it, like, as I say, it's taught me to be within community, to recognize the strengths and localize. Everything's local here. I've been very localized. I don't have I'm not broadcasting because I don't have Wi-Fi. I'm not out there in the world in the same way. And that's because everything is teaching me of what is present, as you say, it's present moment, and what's around me, and how can we all share our resources to get the best for the community. And it really makes you see it's not the best of the individual, it's the best of the community. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole. And it's understanding that this is how we take self-responsibility, our self-responsibility to resource our communities with compassion and collaboration. And it takes a lot, because particularly in the Western world, we're not programmed for community. We talk about it. We talk a good story about, oh yeah, I want to live in community, I want to live with others. No, we don't. Let's be honest. We all want to live in our private little boxes and have, keep our secrets to ourselves, thanks, and have our own private space and shut the door on the world and go, no, thanks, I need to process, go away. Right? It's like, how, really to live. I live in community. I don't, when we're at Sapapu, there has to be other people there. You don't sometimes, and I'm like, oh God, I wish they wouldn't do that. I wish that, but you have to get over that too.
And how many people are there in your community?
I mean, it's nothing. I mean, we don't have the community that obviously we intended to have. So
yeah,
because there's no travel. So our community now is just down to, we've had different varieties of it, or different flavors of it. So we had quite a few waifs and strays to begin with. There was 8 of us, I think, that spent the 2 months there. Basically me and 7 guys. That brought up all my gender issues, let me tell you. And it is, as I say, I mostly am the only woman in a very male environment. So at the moment, there's just Nazami, myself, and we have 2 guys helping us.
Yeah.
So it's mostly just the 4 of us.
I love this, kind of what you're saying about, because I think the two are linked. This feeling of, go away, I want the world to stop. I'm in my little cave, and I need to process, or to actually continue. I've been having these conversations recently about, what is the nature of community? What is the nature of love? Yeah. What does it mean to love? And to really, because obviously I've had 20 plus years investment in health and well-being. And so I've always had this sense of, personal authority over my own health. I rarely go to the doctors. I'm listening to people who immediately that there's anything that comes up or goes wrong, it'll be, have you been to the doctor? Have you been here? Have you been there? Do you know? And everybody's like, the programming and the fear is so deep that people have forgotten how to trust. And this brings us almost back to the beginning as well, and certainly to where you are. We've lost that ability to trust our animal instinct, because the programming and the conditioning, that I love that, the lie and the belief, and in the word and in the whole thing, is that we've handed over somehow to this invisible sense that these leaders are somehow different to us. They're our caretakers, but so many of them, I mean, we know, because we're in this field of doing this work, it's like, if you come to somebody who's never done any, and I say this, you know, I don't mean to be smug, but never done any personal growth work, never looked at themselves, never suffered, you know, because maybe, you know, they've had to really, really go inwards and feel what's uncomfortable. So most of the investment is keeping that at bay. And there's such this huge attachment to it's my way and I am right. And then you put 10 people in a room, and then you put 100 people in the room. And I was saying my breath work, you know what, there are billions of people in this world, billions. Not one of them sees the world the way that you do.
That's
because
right.
you know, because you see the world, we see the world the way that we are. And so we get so stuck in the struggles and the conflict. You know, my shamanic teacher has been one of my greatest teachers in dignity and presence and allowing things to just move through and move through. Because I think we have to unlearn everything that we've learned. Our ancestors have given us their stories and their fears and what they were running from and what they were afraid of. And that's where the warrior spirit comes in and the courage comes in, you know. So for now, here we are in this moment with no idea how things are going to unfold in the world. Do you have any sense for yourself of what, you know, of what you would like for your future, or have you stopped even investing in that at the moment?
I have stopped investing in the future because every time recently that I've like tried to find a way out of the forest, because there is a part of me that's quite desperate to escape, just to get perspective, to get a view, basically, because you're so in it. But every time, I mean, literally, it was hysterical. We almost got a system in place so we could have gone to the mountains for a bit, and then Peru closed, you know, came back into lockdown. I mean, I had to laugh. So I'm like, okay, the forest isn't going to let me out yet.
Right.
I'm just having to really just accept. So I have to just keep surrendering more, to keep accepting more. But one of the things I know that this will not shift. And what I actually see that COVID, the gift of COVID, if you like, for those of us that are awake enough, is really to sit with ourselves, to let the uncomfortable come up. We are all having to process all of the path. We are having to process all of the lies in our bloodlines, in our cellular being. And I do think that's part of this. Having to really look at all those dark spaces. I can see, you know, I've done a huge amount, a whole year of internal personal processing, if you like, because I've not been serving anybody else. But I can see within that personal processing, it's just my processing is the globe's processing. I can see all of it mirrored on the external. It's very easy in this really isolated place to, because I have these periods of isolation, then I come into town and kind of reconnect with the world again, and then you go, oh yeah, there's my process reflected. Yeah, so there really is no separation. So really creating this myth that we are all responsible and that we have to own our responsibility, as you say, for our well-being, for our health, for our right to live, breathe and be, and not keep giving our power away at every level. I mean, it's like, how far are we going to go before we stop giving our power away, our sovereign right to exist as a human with life and to take responsibility? We're all culpable for the mess that this planet is in right now. There are far worse threats than COVID. I mean, I was reading an article just yesterday on, which I actually posted on Facebook, of the plastic issue. You know, that they've done this science, have tested ants, because there are ants everywhere. It's funny, I asked somebody what their greatest fear in the jungle was, and they said ants. I kind of get that now, having lived there for a while. I mean, they come from things that are so small you can barely see them, to these ones that are like 1.5 inches long, called bullet ants.
I've seen them on your Instagram.
Yeah, actually named the bullet ants, because obviously being bitten one feels like being shot by a bullet. Yeah, so apparently they're good medicine, but I don't really want to test that medicine, frankly. But it's like every single ant, even in remote places of the Amazon, which are uncontacted by, they all had plastic in them.
Wow.
So plastic is now in everything. It's in our food, it's in our water. There's not 1 centimetre of this planet that does not have microplastics in it. That's a far worse global threat in the long term than COVID. So when are we all going to start waking up to this?
Yeah.
When are we all going to start, you know, really modifying and changing our behavior, and not just burying our head in another Netflix binge series, or, you know, a bottle of wine, or whatever it is that we resource with, and actually go, do you know what? We actually all have to start changing our behavior.
Right. Really, really interesting. And as you're speaking, this thing came up for me, which hasn't come up before. And I was suddenly like, because you were talking about, you know, the kind of disintegration and stopping kind of handing everything over, and I suddenly thought, you know, people, we're afraid, we're hardwired to be afraid of chaos. Many people are afraid of chaos in their own systems, and so they want to put order in, however that is. Most people have given that sense of putting the order in to somebody or something outside of themselves. And so I'm wondering, like, what kind of thing we could leave people with in this conversation that is kind of helpful, healing, insightful. You know,
I want to speak, yeah, there is, and I have some ideas on that, but I want to speak to something into that chaos.
Right.
Because that fear of chaos is part of the lie of the patriarchy. It's part of this lie of the yang, the progress at all costs that has led to the corporations and the lie of money. It's all a lie. You know, our whole world is based on lies, literally. But, you know, money only exists because we believe in it. It's the lie, again, that we have belief in, like the God, the lie we believe in. So it's the same thing. And what has the chaos is the repression of the feminine. So that's why there is the repression of the feminine, because the masculine is terrified of the outrage, the Kali of the feminine. You know, Mother Nature, I see it. I live with the Kali of the feminine. Believe me, if you want to see the Kali of the feminine, come live in the jungle for a while. You'll see her raging and having a flipping hiccup temper tantrum every 2 minutes. Right? It's like, as she expresses herself in the pure, sublime beauty of, you know, I watch Love in Motion every day of my life here. And it's the life, death, rebirth cycle is instant. You know, you see a rotten twig and you see life sprouting out of it, you know, literally overnight sometimes when the rains have been heavy. I mean, that pure love in motion in terms of the creatrix. And the jungle is chaos. The jungle is an absolute tumultuous chaos. But within that chaos is divine order. And so I get that what needs to, in the balance, there needs to be an outrage of the feminine. The feminine does need to wake up, not in a the men are bad or anything like, it's not that. It's got to come back into balance. It's out of balance. Anything on this planet that is out of balance, as we know, basically fucks up eventually. And that is what is happening. So we need, but the feminine is terrified to outrage. It's terrible because it's been taught that it's not good. You've got to be a good girl. We're still playing, to a large extent, the good girl script. And that outrage is bubbling up. And it's like, that is what gives, you know, courage. There's another rage, the courage of the heart to stand up. And as Marianne Williamson so beautiful put in her presidential, you know, love says no. It's okay, love to say no. And to express that. So my sense is the way through is local community support groups for people to gather locally, to connect locally, even, and to accept all. You know, we have to be able to accept the commonality and diversity. You know, the jungle is this great big tumultuous net where I see a different species every single day. I've been here for over a year. I see something different every single day.
Glastonbury is quite like that.
Yes, it is. Oh, yes, it definitely is. One of every variety. But in that, but it all just, it's not fighting with each other. I mean, yes, there's a, you know, there's a defensive, you could say it's a predatory universe from that perspective, you know, trees grow spikes to protect themselves, but it all kind of tumbles along together. It's evolution. And we need to be able to come back into this balance of the outraging. So one of the things that I feel really helps people is your kind of work with breath work is really powerful, but movement. But movement, like, as in, you know, sort of dance movement, but not dance, you know, but movement just to, like, what
somatic exploring.
Somatic exploring is huge. It's like, because that's where it is. We are not embodied. We've been taught to be in the mind, and we need to give, you know, mastery back to the heart. You know, that it's time for the master and the emissary to come together. To really work together rather than in separation. We have to come back to that embodied experience of when we can touch those uncomfortable places, when we can touch the rage that actually sits in all of us, if we're honest. And safely find ways to outrage, to let the pressure out of the pressure cooker in safe ways, that's when things will start to change.
I love how you're breaking down these words. I absolutely love it. And I can feel in my system a response, because, you know, my body work, my breath work practice is changing all the time, because the more and more I do it, the more I see where we are frozen in our systems.
Yes.
And the more I see people who might be doing this and the body is rigid. And, you know, and that's been my life's work. We always teach what we need to learn, don't we? You know, but my life's work has been coming back into the body, developing a relationship with that felt sense and that somatic experience, creating a sense of safety from which I can move out into the world by recognizing and knowing myself, and being able to then become the witness, so that I can not go into the reactive space. And again, you know, reactivity is different to response, and
Absolutely.
outrage can have it, and anger can have a very, very valid place as teachers, but it's all about the consciousness that we bring, whether it's to the community, to the feeling, to the experience. But I agree with you. I think embodiment is kind of, we need to get back to those animal instincts, because when we're in those, we know what feels true and right and wrong.
And the other
confusion is dilution.
Yeah, it's true. And this powerful way forward, I really believe in the power of the talking stick. Because you can see it, like how divisive Facebook has become, for exactly the reason that you mentioned earlier. There's 7 billion people and we all have a different view, you know, and we're being fed that. You know, Facebook and those social media platforms they thrive on conflict. They thrive on divide and conquer. So we see now with friends that we thought were on the same page as us, and suddenly we realize they're not, you know, and they want us to wear a mask and they think we're killing them, you know, and this kind of thing. And it's awful. And it's like, so if we are to build healthy communities, we have to be able to witness each person's, you know, the way of counsel, in terms of everyone, when they're holding the stick, paying sacred witness to somebody's voice and hearing everybody's voice, in order to know what new comes into that space in the circle in the middle, because there's the empty creative space of what emerges is about each person's voice in collaboration. Without, you know, so that people are safe to have a different opinion, because people have become unsafe to voice what they feel anymore. And that is just going to create more of this pressure cooker effect, where then it's, you know, it's unhealthy rage, it's violence, it's fighting, it's a reaction rather than a responsibility. Outrage can be a response, a responsibility, taking responsibility for that experience of felt sense, if it's allowed a safe container and safe ways to express. And this is going to, you know, we've put ourselves back, in some ways we put ourselves back years, and in other ways we've been given such a gift. It's whether we have the consciousness to really step into this and own the gift that we have been given, and to start to do the work.
Certainly I believe that that's true for me, and that's my personal experience, and I'm listening to that for a lot of people, even those who are struggling perhaps more than I might be. And mine's been waves after waves of, okay, this is presenting itself for me to look at, this is coming in, and I'm grateful to have had the time and the ability to go inward more and actually feel, because most of us have been so, you know, our ability to actually hold attention and thoughts, you know, I saw somewhere recently, most of us touch our phone 1,000 times more in a day than we would touch a lover or a friend, and you know, and even that now is like, you know, you can't even do that. Oh, did you hug that person? Oh my God. You know, and then we're constantly kind of going against ourselves. So coming back into the body, into the breath, reaching out, listening, finding these places where we can create healthy community, and a healthy community, a healthy body, is only really the sum of its parts. So I love what you said about bringing everything in, because we've all got, you know, if you think about what's moving around in the body at any point in time, you know, and how it's affected by environment, by thought, by hormones, by, you know, you talked about the plastics, we look at the food that we eat, the way that we consume, we look at the distractions, you know, and there's no space around things for people to actually feel the feelings and then make up their mind based on their experience of what feels true. That's right. And I love this about coming back to the heart as well, because that's also the heart of my teachings. You know, this is the true teacher. It's the longest journey we will ever make, is that from the head to the heart, to come into the consciousness of the heart as the teacher. the warrior heart as the teacher, you know. Really interesting. So I feel like there's just a huge amount more that we could say. Is there anything else that's come up that you can think of? We're probably about at time now, but is there anything else that you'd like to bring in towards the end of this, just about, how can people find you? That's one question. Are you willing to be found? Is there still work?
Yeah, no, I am very willing. I'm very willing to be found. Instagram is probably the best right now. I mean, my website's down and I haven't managed to find enough kind of time and space to get it organized, which is Davina Mackail. You can find me on Instagram at Davina Mackail. I don't know what the hashtag thing or whatever you have to put before that is, but that's the best. And that really very much has my journey on that. And I'm still doing readings for people when I'm in town and one-to-one online sessions, but that's the only sort of work I'm doing really out in the world in this moment.
And what sorts of readings are you offering to people?
I use the tarot, but as a channel, basically. I've been doing readings for over 30 years. So they're very much empowerment, guidance sessions. They're when you're stuck, don't know where you're going. I channel very fast, and people get a lot of information. Right. So somebody expressed having a reading with me as being standing in a wind tunnel for an hour, put it that way. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I do make sure it's recorded so you can go back and reflect on it afterwards, because it takes quite a while to digest, but a lot of information comes through.
I love your energy around it. Yeah.
So and I love reading for people. That is a passion of mine. I like, just opening that space and seeing what comes through for them. Because I think people need, sometimes we all need help, don't we? We all need a helping hand. And that's another thing it doesn't matter where we are in the hierarchy of experience or what we've done or how we are. That's really, really being willing to ask for help and accept that we're vulnerable and accept that we really need others in this process. It's like, and God, I want to bring back time. I mean, I'm very blessed, I have, because I don't really sort of subscribe to the whole, and obviously I'm very isolated in the jungle. So at least I get hugs every day. I have human touch every day, and that's a bonus. It's the biggest shock. I tell you one little small story, so to go back. The biggest shock of this right at the beginning was talking to my mum on the phone. God bless our mothers. Right? My mother is a absolute proponent of the BBC. Well, BBC told me, darling. Has to be right. God bless her. So, and she had her grandson had been around, and she said, I said, oh, well, obviously we don't hug. And I didn't get it at first. And I kind of got off the phone and I was like, hang on a minute. So your grandson's been in your house and you haven't hugged him? And I had to go back and I just said, Mum, what do you mean? I said, you didn't give him a hug. And that's how much she had believed the terror of this disease, that her own grandson was in her own house and she didn't hug him. That was huge for me. That was a real, and I just think, wow, how many households. And my favorite essay on the whole of COVID was the coronation essay written by Charles Eisenstein. If you've not read it, it's really worth it. It's a brilliant piece of work. And that really speaks to me of, like, surely any of us would rather, I certainly would. It's like, what price life? We all have to die. That's what we're here for. We're all on our way. It's a matter about when it turns up. And that's another thing. We do not deal with this COVID thing because we have hidden death. We've tried to sterilize death. We're not even in relationship to death anymore.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
We need to walk with death by our side. Yeah. We have to face that one. It's just our birthday.
Yeah.
And when we can get over that, this, save lives, keep safe, it's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to get over, and really accept that, no, I would rather hug my friend. I would rather live a few days less and have that hug and feel that love and connection and that deliciousness of a hug in this moment than live an extra 5 days.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And it's these choices and this waking up. It's like, I sometimes do find it sort of frustrating, and I just think, okay, it's just, we have to accept where people are at, but it's like this blindedness. The propaganda is so clever in how it has blinded people. So that they cannot, it's like the truth, it's like in a system, because it's all part of the system, we're all in this system together. So it's like, where is the truth beyond the lie of the system we've created? And we have to go deeper. we've got to go deeper, and we've got to go deeper. And the only place for that is inside.
I love that we've brought two older women's voices into this conversation today. I listen to a lot of very wonderful, very inspiring men talking about this stuff. There are women out there talking about it as well, of course, but for me, it's been really enriching to actually, you know, this sense of the Kali, the outrage, the stuff, because as that bubbles up for me and I see where that's been repressed in me, it just needs to be able to, you know, this balance. And I love that you also framed it really early on as it's not about anymore a return to the matriarchy. It's about balance. Everything, it's about balance. So bringing our voices forward, bringing that conversation in. One last thing I'd like to ask you actually quickly before we end is, do you find that when you speak out like this, in this way, presenting your truth and presenting what you feel, you know, in relationship to the things that happen in the jungle, to the chaos, to the animals, to living on the edge all the time, to the community, and to everything that we've been conditioned by, when you speak out about that, do you find that you come under verbal attack, or, you know, are people critical?
We'll find out when you put this out.
The thought crossed my mind. It was like, okay, here we go.
You know, but I have kept quiet. I have kept quiet. At the beginning of COVID, I put things out because I obviously do have controversial views, or not the mainstream views. And yeah, I came under fire very, very quickly. And I was kind of shocked. I was like, oh, okay, I'm not going to engage in that conversation.
Likewise.
Because it's not a real conversation.
Yeah.
It's somebody sitting behind they're not face to face, eyeball to eyeball with me.
There's no talking stick. Yeah.
There's no talking stick. Exactly. There's no witness. So it's easy to be abused in that situation. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to put myself up for that abuse. But I am at the point, and again, I've been through a very deep journey, and I'm only beginning. This conversation with you is my first kind of emergence, even to know through this process of even knowing what I'm thinking in relation to this in a way.
Yeah.
And I have felt it's been bubbling up in the last few weeks. It's been bubbling up for a while. It's like, I can't keep quiet anymore.
This is how I'm feeling. We're at a critical point where there's a sense of, I think many of us rode that same wave. And actually that was a teacher for me as well, because the teaching in that was discernment. It was right timing. It was going in even deeper to what my rage wanted to actually teach me once I applied that discernment. You know, you talked about the emissary and the control, you know, but now I feel that there's almost, well, you know, and we hear this a lot, at what point when we are keeping quiet have we become complicit in everything just rolling through and all these rights being eroded? And I cannot let that happen. I can't let that happen. Okay, well,
and I think if we can talk with reason, you know, like with reason from our hearts, from that place of centeredness, it gives people permission to have another view, to hear something different into the mix. Because I'm like you, I'm like, I am complicit in my masters, you know, in my own enslavement if I'm not prepared to say something.
Yeah.
And I think we are at that stage, and I do believe it's women. Because, you know, that's the balance that has been repressed. That is the outrage that needs to have the courage to be spoken. But in a way that you know, in solidarity and holding hands. I mean, I want to see women around the fire holding hands, being in solidarity with each other in community, to bring this back and to hold the men safe. To hold the men safe, because what I truly see is that, you know, the globe is being run by an awful lot of traumatized boys. Boy is traumatized, bullied, boy, you know, they've been bullied at school, so they're bullying us. You know, bless them, God bless them. It's just they have their own process, and I it's like I want to get a bunch of powerful women and go up and hold circles around all those poor men, so that they can actually be in their vulnerability and be held to, you know, really collapse themselves and feel their frozen stuff, so that they can come back to the heart, can come back to compassion, rather than feeling that they have to fight this through bullying, through protection, through pushing away.
Well, you know, as you said at the beginning, again, goodness knows there's going to be an awful lot of trauma to heal. I think that that's something that most people are agreed on, that there is a collective trauma that is going to need. All of my friends who work in counseling, psychotherapy, and all the rest are absolutely swamped at the moment. They've never been busier. Many of them have had to give up jobs and trainings in order to solely focus on their client sessions.
Yeah.
There's a reason for that. You know, let's not forget that all of these instincts that because we are very adaptable, we shut down and we start to adapt to what is happening, but that is not necessarily a great thing. It's a form of dissociation. You know, anybody, you only have to work with somebody, or, you know, be that person in most of our cases, where we have understood the effects of trauma in our system, and that the adaptation that we learn, and that the system shutdown and the dissociation that we learn is not a good thing. It's a coping strategy. It's an intelligence. It's an intelligent choice, but it's not a long-lasting choice that we want to see more of.
And it leads to ill health, and it you know, it wrecks our immune system. You know, everything we are doing currently wrecks our immune system rather than supports it. You know, if we're going to get over, if we're really going to reclaim our well-being, then, you know, we need to breathe freely, we need to take off masks, we need to get outside, we need to have fresh air, we need to eat good food, we need to exercise, we need to connect with human beings, we need human touch. It's really important for our immunity. So yes, all of those things.
Well, okay, on that note, let's see, you know, we'll be posting this later today, and you know, I have the choice to enable comments or disable comments. Let's leave them up for a while and see.
Enable comments, bring it on. Okay, I'm a long way away.
Thanks, Davina. I'll be reaching out going, I'm in the jungle, I can't get any signal, you're on your own, Steph. Yikes. Although I know I'm not. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop recording now, so I'm gonna really I'll stay on, I'll have a quick chat with you, but thank you very, very much, Davina, for being on today, for bringing your wisdom, your inspiration, your energy, your focus, your passion, and all of those things that, you know, this is what we need as inspiration.
Thank you.
Thank you.